Hello, everyone. I'm Noreen. I'm the host of the In Conversation podcast. And today I have with me Daniel Fryer. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be here.
So, Daniel, please introduce yourself.
Yes, my name's Daniel Fry. Thank you. I am a therapist, a coach, a mental health and wellness consultant. I produce workshops and webinars on many aspects of mental health and well-being, and I'm the author of two self-help titles.
Wonderful. And we've been put together by the wonderful Catherine, who's been a fantastic supporter of mine in my work that I've been doing the last couple of years. And I think you guys also go back way back, if I remember correctly.
We met on the same journalism degree. I think we started that in 1994, so I've
Oh.
known it since.
So, what we are here to talk about today are around two, or actually three topics, right? Talking about anxiety and stress management, burnout prevention and recovery, and resilience. So, when Catherine did first put us together and we had that initial conversation, I thought it was quite interesting, this work that you're doing. And I've definitely noticed it more as we come in my time during corporate and also even now today as an entrepreneur, like how it starts to manifest in such a different way than if I compare it to when my dad was working in sort of the earlier years, and how being online and being digital and being present just has added a whole other level of stress into the work environment as well. So, when we talk about anxiety and stress management, how did you come to work in this area? You said you started as a journalist, but now you're working as a therapist and a coach and a wellness consultant.
So I pivoted in my career about the age of 35. I always liked writing, which is why I kind of ended up in journalism, but I didn't like journalism. I didn't like mainstream media. It was too stressful, and there were too many egos in any given office. So I then went into contract publishing, and contract publishing was really stressful. And it ended up being like conveyor belt journalism. You didn't have time to decompress the last thing that you wrote before you were writing the next 5, 10, 15 things. And I kind of fell into a kind of freebie introduction to hypnotherapy course. And I really liked it. I was very good at it. So I then did a diploma in hypnotherapy, a diploma in cognitive behavioral hypnotherapy, a master's in cognitive behavior therapy. And it just, but I blundered into it. But the anxiety and the stress came about. It's probably about 2005. I joined one of those kind of business breakfast network things. So you all turn up on a morning, one day a week. You sit around a table, you get to know each other, you eat breakfast, and you like supposed to refer work to one another. And my first day there, I had to stand up and give a talk about who I was and what I did. And I talked about CBT, I talked about hypnotherapy. And at the end, the very first question was, so what do you specialize in? And I went, well, CBT and hypnotherapy. And they went, yes, but what do you specialize in? And I went, CBT and hypnotherapy. And then they asked the question a third time and the penny dropped. And I went, anxiety and stress management. And that was the peg they needed to hang me off. And after that, this is Daniel. He's our anxiety and stress specialist. And the reason I picked those two things is they covered what I was trying to say anyway, because anxiety is the number one presenting symptom in therapy and coaching, bar none. And stress is a tiny little word, but stress isn't a diagnosis, not officially. It's a catch-all term. You can be anxious and stressed. You can be angry and stressed, depressed, guilty, ashamed and stressed. Skin conditions like psoriasis are often stress related. Insomnia is often stress related. IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, is nearly always stress related. You can turn to drugs and alcohol because of your stress. So between anxiety and stress, I was kind of saying I help people with CBT and hypnotherapy. But obviously, after I kind of like stuck my flag in that ground, that guided all my continual professional development courses for the next few years. So I kind of became the anxiety and stress specialist that I said I was.
And would you say that everyone struggles from anxiety or stress at some point in their
Um,
lives?
I mean, most people will get anxiety. It's the number one presenting symptom, but we all suffer from stress. It's the number one thing the world over. We're all stressed for a variety of reasons. So stress management is very, very important.
And is it self-induced or is it more the environment, the setting, where we are, who we're with? How does it tend to manifest most commonly?
I mean, it's a bit of both, really. I mean, typically stress, especially work stress, is kind of defined. If the situation that you find yourself in, whether it's personal or professional, if you feel like you've got this, if you feel like you can cope, you're more likely to experience what we call good stress. And we
Hmm.
forget that stress can be good. It's called eustress. The prefix EU literally means good. Think of the excitement of a challenging deadline that you're rising to. The good stress of planning and executing a wedding, or preparing for the birth of a child. Stress can be good, and if you feel that you are in control of the stressful situation, it's good stress. Bad stress is distress, and that DI prefix means twice the or two times the. So
Mm.
if the stress, if it feels like it's exceeding your ability to cope, it's more likely to become bad stress. But there are two types of exceeding your ability to cope. One is down to you, it's your interpretation. You start telling yourself that it's unmanageable, that you can't cope. And once you start thinking that way, it becomes a self fulfilling prophecy. So I help people change their thinking. But the problem with work stress today is that we are constantly bombarded with unreasonable workloads, unreasonable deadlines consistently. And you cannot subject any organism to consistent stress without it breaking down, without it getting ill, without it collapsing and dying, basically. And if you're in a work environment that constantly demands 110% or more, that constantly gives you unmanageable workloads and unmanageable deadlines, no amount of mental health and well-being workshops, webinars, or therapies are going to fix that. The
Sure.
problem, yeah, the problem is institutional. And you were talking about your father just before we started recording and saying how things were different then. My lifetime, when I first left school, I mean, I left school at 17. I started doing a few jobs that I wasn't particularly interested in or had the aptitude for. I went back to college, I went back to university, I went back into the workplace at the age of 27. And through all that time and beyond, work stress or stress was not the number one cause of staff absenteeism. It was repetitive strain injury, RSI. It was back pain. Work stress didn't exist. We've created it.
Interesting. The one thing I was just thinking of when you talked about the good stress is I often say this to people I'm coaching with public speaking or communication skills. When people get really nervous just before they're about to get on stage, there's no point in telling them to calm down and breathe through it. I often say just change the wording. As you said, can you change your thinking? So instead of saying I'm nervous, can we start saying I'm excited, right? And create that, build up that. It's the same feeling, right? You're saying this good stress of, excitement of a wedding or preparing for something that you're actually excited about. Like, can we take that? It's the same type of energy, but just reword it and reframe it into something else, which is I think better than saying calm down.
Oh, I would never tell anyone to calm down. But you're right. Reframing is a very important part of therapy and coaching. You say anxiety, I say worry or nervous excitement. You say pain, I say discomfort. You say, oh my God, it was a complete nightmare. And I'll say, well, it wasn't the end of the world. It's reframing is important.
You survived.
Yes, but then you've got to give them like a lot more meat to those bones in order for them to interpret it. So performance anxiety is by definition an anxiety issue, whether that's going out on stage and speaking, whether it's chairing a meeting, whether it's in the bedroom or at a
Or
party.
sports, athletes, that's what I was also thinking of, right? That's also a certain element of, I guess, expectation and stress they put on themselves. They've got to win, they've got to win, they've got to perform, right? So.
So I help transmute anxiety to worry, if that's applicable, or nervous excitement, if that's more applicable than worry.
Hmm. And then you were just saying how, that workplace stress has become the number one reason of absenteeism. and if we then move that is obviously a result of burnout and then bad health. I mean, I've experienced that myself. There was this one year, I think I was just promoted for the first time, and I was really trying to prove my point, prove my worth, prove my abilities, and all of, I mean, I completely I put it on myself 100%. But I just worked crazy hours, right? And, weekends, everything. And then the end of the year, of course, I stopped and I was ill for about a month. I just couldn't cope anymore. Finally, I went to my boss and I said, look, this can't continue anymore. You didn't ask me for this, but I've done it myself. But it is a reality. We come across it more and more often, right? So what can we do to protect ourselves or prevent it from happening in the first place? I mean, okay, if you're in that unimaginable situation where they keep giving you unreasonable deadlines, okay, we obviously need to have a conversation there. But what else can we be mindful of?
Well, I mean, you just hit a nail right on the head. You went and had a word with your boss and said, "I'm sorry, this just isn't sustainable." I've worked with a lot of people where I've helped them to understand that they can cope with the things they're telling themselves they can't cope with. That they're not useless just because they've let things slide. They're
Mm.
worthwhile, fallible people under a lot of pressure. When you change the mindset, they can go back in the environment and perform better. But for every one of those, there's somebody where I've had to give them the courage to go back into the workplace and say, I can't do this. Really, one lady sticks in my mind years ago, and I was working in a clinic in London, and she came to see me, and it was for work stress. And on the very first session, she said that she felt like she was doing the work of three people. And as she got talking to me, like two sessions in, I had the light bulb, and I went, "Oh, you said you thought you were doing the work of three people." She said, "Yeah." So I went, "You are." She said, "What do you mean?" I said, "How many people are in your team?" She said, "Five." I went, "How many people were in your team 4 years ago?" And she went, "About 14." I went,
Mm.
"How long have you been stressed like this?" And she went, "About 4 years."
Mm.
I went, "You need to go back to your boss and have a conversation." And she immediately went, "Oh God, I can't. I can't.
Yeah.
No, I can't do that. I can't rock the boat. Oh no, no, no. He'd fire me. I'd lose the house. I'd lose everything." And you go, and
Fear.
that's what we needed to work with. We had to get rid of that. I can't do this. I can't be a troublemaker. I'll get fired. Terrible things will happen. We had to work with that so that she could calmly knock on her boss's door and just say, "Look, it's impossible." And
Yeah.
so, I mean, work stress is the number one cause of staff absenteeism. The number one cause of that absenteeism is this thing called presenteeism, always on.
Yeah.
First one in, last one out, doesn't take any breaks, works and eats lunch at their desk, is contactable at night. They're the ones that burn out. They're the ones that do take time off work sick with stress. Also, as they're burning out, they are less productive, they're
Yeah.
more making really big, costly mistakes. And after you've burnt them out, they might come back, but they won't stay very long. They'll leave and they'll cost you money in terms of time and recruitment. The people who aren't bombarded by excessive workloads, but who also know how to assert themselves, come in on time, leave on time, take proper breaks. And I'm talking also about a morning coffee break, an afternoon coffee break, as well as lunch, and then go home and switch off. They are not going to be taking time off work sick with stress. They are more productive. They are not going to be the ones making the big costly mistakes. And they save you money in terms of recruitment and training because they stay longer. But culturally, we're taught to value the always on people.
Yeah.
Why can't you
Why?
be? I know, but it's like, right, you want me to be more like the person that's really stressed, making loads of mistakes, is less productive, and is about to take 2 weeks off work sick with stress. Right, okay, great. I'll do that then, shall I?
Doesn't make any logical sense. But it's like we almost wear it like a badge of honor. I mean, I remember even in my early career when we worked in hotels and operations, like we'd be like, oh yeah, I'm the one who did two back-to-back shifts, or like I pulled an all-nighter, or yeah, I covered like, so many sections, and I didn't, sit down even for a minute. Like The only
Yeah.
time you would actually take a break is for the ones who were smokers. You'd actually go outside and have a cigarette before you can actually, do anything else. It's just, but it was like a real badge of honor, but it
Yeah.
absolutely does not make sense because as you just described now, it's the ones who work like that. And also culture plays a role. Presentism is very much true in many, many cultures, especially as I'm here now in Asia. You see it across so many different countries. But you're right, it doesn't actually long term, it's not the right strategy.
No. The odd thing is that I mean I've been practicing as a therapist and as a coach, and I've been doing workshops and webinars since about 2005. Um, and I've been preaching that message since 2005, but work stress has got worse. It's just no
Clearly,
one
they're not listening to you.
they're not listening. Well, I'm not the only one doing this. They're not listening to any of us. They bring us in, they do the webinar, everyone asks really interesting questions and says, "Thank you, that's so amazing." And then promptly forget about it 5 minutes later, go back to their desks, eat through their lunch break, and you're like, just be, as an individual, take ownership of it, but also as an institution,
Yeah.
take ownership of it and realize that you can't make your staff always on without breaking them,
Yeah.
without costing you lots of money.
Yeah, it definitely starts with leadership, right? It starts at the top, and if the leaders are not going to emulate that kind of behavior, it's very hard for others to do that. However, as you rightly said, as an individual, we can take ownership of that. We can set our boundaries. We can emulate the behavior that we desire to see, even if we're not seeing others. And
Yeah.
if you don't see it in others, okay, this is not your place. This is not where you belong, and hopefully you can find a place you can move on, or you find your way to manage yourself between. Because the other thing I think that I definitely struggled with is my identity was so entwined with my job.
Yeah.
Like when you were just describing this woman you're talking to, like, oh, I'm doing the work of three, and it's like, "Ah, I'll get fired if I even challenge, or like I'll lose my job, I'll lose my pay. Like that was a real fear that I used to feel
Mhm.
also. But we also we create that for ourselves too.
That desperately for I'd love to know what happened. I mean, it's partly the austerity and the financial crash, but the boomer generation. I mean, I don't like separating, but
Yeah.
the boomer generation weren't like this. I'm Gen X. We weren't like this. If you told me to work late for no good reason, I'd be like, good luck with that, and I'd literally get my coat and walk out the office, and there would be nothing you could do.
Yeah.
Threatened to fire me, I'd go, oh, fine, I quit. And then I join a job agency and I temp for a little bit, and then I find another job a few weeks later. We have created this environment where if you do get fired, it takes you months and months and months to find another job. You
Yeah.
have to do about a million hoops. You have to have 5 job interviews. You have to do 3 projects for that, and we've got to stop that.
Yeah, I agree. It
Um,
has become incredibly difficult.
yeah, but we stacked everything on like the millennial generation, and they're the ones that buckled under that pressure and thought we're going to have to. But
Just deal with it.
exactly, suck it up.
Suck it up and deal with it. You can't change anything.
And I like so like now Gen Z are coming into the workplace. They're getting a lot of flack, and they're accused of not having much resilience, and that's true to an extent. And they're having to bring resilience training into the workplace to help them. But they're also quite rightly looking at that and going, "You want no? I'm not. No,
I'm not. I'm not accepting
I'm
this.
sorry. I'm
Rightly
not
so.
Yeah, exactly. And I could do without the performative crying on TikTok. Um, but they're absolutely right in going, no, I'm sorry, I'm not, this is not going to be the rest of my life. It's just, I'm not doing it. I didn't study for this. No. And then don't
The,
blame them at all. Let's turn it
no.
around.
The one trend I've seen that's come up from that generation is work 3 to 5 years, take a break, and then come back and take a break for like, I don't know, 6 months to a year, then come back and doing these mini retirements rather than waiting. I mean, they're going to be working far longer than any of us, right? So I actually can commend them for that. And then you talked about resilience. Sometimes I do almost Does resilience sometimes become a badge of honor as well? Like, re oh, I'm so strong. I can do this. I just, deal with it. But
Um, I I think we're actually it's gone the other way. I think we're all losing our resilience because we're
Mm.
bombarded so much on a daily basis, not just at work. Life is becoming so difficult. Just think, you work a full-time job, and nobody's staying at home and house minding and managing, and you're both at work, you're both pressed for time, you're both managing work and the house. Even doing something simple like contacting customer services over a problem turns into this complete saga that you don't need. Plus, you've got the cost of living crisis. Plus, you've got climate anxiety. Plus, you've got all this geopolitical instability. Our resilience is under attack in a number of areas. And I think some in danger, you can become too resilient and a bit immune and inured to it all. But also there is the mental resilience. I don't think I can cope with this anymore, but there's also our physical resilience, that ability to return to balance and bounce back after adversity is being eroded because it doesn't just feel constant, it is.
Mm. So if you were to define what resilience means to you or what you would like it to look like, what would it be?
So for me, it's the ability to bounce back from stress, ever that stress may be. So, generally speaking, you are psychologically healthy. Something happens, it might knock you for six, but you recover and you bounce back. You might even come back stronger. People always talk about like post-traumatic stress disorder, but they forget you can also have post-traumatic growth. You can bounce back from a trauma stronger than you were before. Um, Resilience, it's a trait that you can have, it's a trait that you can be taught. I think more people need to be taught not just resilience, but also critical thinking skills. We've lost that ability as well. And I think those two are interlinked. But I also think that the society and its structure needs to just step back and take a long, hard look at itself and go, we need to implement systemic change.
If only the world leaders would listen to this
I,
conversation, then we would be able to bring about systemic change. I will bring us to my final question, although I'm sure we could have carried this on for a lot longer. Speaking of leaders or society, who are the people that inspire you?
Yeah, sadly, not many of the leaders in society do that. There are names in therapy that have inspired me. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing this. I'm a proponent of rational emotive behavior therapy. The guy that developed it is an unsung hero in a poll of peers. He's considered more influential to therapy than Freud. Um, there's a modern father of hypnotherapy called Milton Erickson, and he's a very interesting character who took a very, very unorthodox approach to therapy. But the interesting thing about the field of therapy is its history is very patriarchal.
Hmm.
There are just as many really, really influential women in the field of hypnotherapy as there are men, but they barely manage a footnote. But for life in general, two people. On the one hand, do you know the author Terry Pratchett?
Hmm.
He wrote fantasy novels that are satirical and very, very funny and very, very humanist. And it's not that humanists need a Bible, but if they ever had one, it would be for me the collected works of Terry Pratchett, the wisdom, the kindness, and the compassion. And not so much a leader, but the wife of one. So Franklin, I think it was Franklin D. Roosevelt, because there were two President Roosevelts, but Eleanor Roosevelt was the first lady. Um, Apart from a few hiccups, nearly everything that came out of her mouth was wisdom, compassion, empathy, understanding. I'm always using her quotes with my clients in my therapy room. Quite frankly, I think she'd have made a better president than her husband.
Okay, let's not open that door today, but thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Daniel, for sharing this conversation with me. And yeah, let's hope other people listen to this, be inspired by it. And, if even one person can make a change either for themselves or within the culture, within the organization, I think we've done our jobs today.
if one person could go back to their workplace and say, this is too much, I can't do it anymore, we need to change this, then yes.
Job done. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Have a good rest of your day.